Right now, with AI, we're all focused on large language models, LLMs, but there are other aspects of AI that can be incredibly useful from a UFO research point of view. That means data analysis, number crunching, and the like. And I think we're only at the very beginning of that. You hear about something like the Galileo project, Avi Loeb's endeavor, where they've got telescopes out and they're tracking known versus unknown aerial objects. And they're using, it's all AI, it's all algorithms to sift out. So I think, there's a lot of possibilities in all areas, both document research and data collection and all of that. And I think AI can be very helpful. There's a lot of dangers to AI. We can get into that. Absolutely, many dangers. In terms of your question about the nation state, now that came out of left field for me. That's an interesting question. We are looking at, look, the nation state already, we're near 2025 here. It ain't what it used to be in the 20th century. Let's just put that right out there. You remember when COVID was in full force and we were being forced to take vaccines or being locked down and all this stuff. And what you could see was that every nation in the Western Alliance was working in lockstep, using the exact same talking points, the exact same propaganda points, build back better and all this nonsense, and really to bludgeon the public into submission. I think there can be no question about this anymore. It was a heavy-handed, beat the head of the public over and over with the big stick. And what that tells us is that these national leaders were not acting independently. They're part of a collective, probably World Economic Forum, maybe the Bilderberg people. And that is the reality. So the nation state has been in a bad way for a long time. You mentioned it yourself. Global financial institutions have vastly more power than most nation states. Okay, there's a few outliers, US, China, Russia. But most nations are not big enough, maybe India now, but most of them are not big enough to really withstand the power of most multinational corporations or financial institutions that want to, break into your country and siphon all your mineral wealth out or whatever. They can't resist. The African nations, they've struggled with this for generations, for example.
Well, we're seeing it in Ukraine with minerals in Ukraine. There's a big battle over who's going to get their hands on that, right?
Yeah, It's funny. Trump brings up the expression, "You have no cards." Well, it's true Zelensky has no cards, but neither does Trump. The Russians have the cards there. The mineral wealth that they're talking about in Ukraine is 90% of it is under Russian feet right now, the Russian army. They're not going to get that. That's not happening. If Trump really wants to make a deal about the minerals, he'll probably just deal directly with Putin. The Russians have 20 times the amount of mineral wealth anyway that the Ukrainians have, so why wouldn't he? But it's all like the nation state is on an absolute long-term decline. I don't think there's any way around this. We're seeing a kind of reaction against globalization happening now. Whether you like or don't like Trump, that's what this election really signified, kind of an anti-globalist movement. And you see it in other parts of the world. And it's not difficult to see that Russia, again, like them or not, are not on board with the path of Western globalization. And maybe not the Chinese either. But in the long run, my belief is that we're going to move toward a kind of centralized global system. I mean, you're either looking at Huxley or Orwell. Huxley saw the whole thing as one global state. Okay. Orwell saw it as like three. Right. Pick your pick. Pick your poison. I don't know how it will break down. Right now, it looks like we're moving toward Orwell. But Huxley may win in the long run if you give it another 50 years, 100 years. And I say this because we're looking at an ever greater digital integration of the world. This is inevitable. This is not a political thing. This is not like Trump's doing this or Biden did that. It's irrelevant. We're moving toward a world that is becoming inexorably more digitally controlled and therefore centralized. It's almost like they almost can't even help themselves. It's like, look, you and I are talking like across many miles with great digital connection. We figured out the echo that I was getting. So it's kind of amazing. It's like magical. To make that happen, though, requires a very integrated global digital structure that's going to require rules that are systematic for everyone. In other words, we're moving toward a world that's like it or not, is more and more centralized and less wiggle room for freedom, unfortunately. Now, I'm on the side of the forces that want to slow that down and put a brake on it for as long as possible. But I don't know if that's going to be possible to stop forever.
I guess I'm just curious about this idea that as corporations and private finance become more and more powerful and the nation state becomes less and less relevant, what are the odds that, I mean, it seems like a very unstable situation in the interim, but at some point, someone is going to probably demonstrate some UFO technology, right? I mean, at the point we're at now, we're kind of in the science fiction world. We're in sort of the knee of the curve of Kurzweil's Singularity. Mm-hmm. It seems like if there was ever a time to roll out the anti-gravity, this would be the time.
It could be. You know? I think the same thing. I think, I don't believe it's an accident that for the past couple of decades, we have been moving toward two different, but I think increasingly as time goes by, maybe related outcomes. The AI, what we used to call the Singularity, now we might call AGI or ASGI, right? Super general intelligence. At the same time as some kind of UFO disclosure. Because they're being driven by basically the same forces. They're not different forces. The forces for UFO disclosure fundamentally are being pushed by our ever-changing technological infrastructure, because we are better and better able to have these types of conversations. We couldn't do this in 1985. We can do it now. Mm-hmm. And the same with the Singularity. So it could be that we hit I used to ask myself this a lot. I still ask, what's going to come first? The Singularity or disclosure? Or will they happen close to the same time? Because it's inevitable that they happen at the same time. If you get to a genuine singularity, well, would that mean then that we would have a computer intelligence that would be able to figure this out on its own and tell us the answer? I've often wondered that. It doesn't strike me as impossible. Or some variation of that, where, we have enough computational power and capability with AI that you and me and like half the people in the audience listening are able independently to confirm that it's real and to the proof sound like a math equation almost. I don't think that's impossible. So they may happen sort of at the same time, and that's kind of an amazing thing to think about. I do think they're going to happen close to each other. Either way, I don't know which one will be first, but I think they're going to be very close together, because it will be impossible at that point probably to deny. And then we're going to be looking at the spin factory coming into play. The government will do that. The government or the intelligence people have, I will bet you, probably 20 or 30 fallback positions that they've already got mapped out. So fallback position number one is where they're at now. It's like, well, we did say there was nothing going on for all this time, but it turns out there is a potential unknown phenomena. We don't know what it is. We don't know this, all of this nonsense. That's all lies, because they do know. They absolutely do know. And the book I just published is one more piece of that proof, by the way.
Well, thank you for mentioning that, because I this is something that it's like at the same time we seem to know nothing. And then you have people like Bob Lazar who are like, no, I went into the building. I went inside the craft. There's a table with the workbench and there's some stuff on, It's like you can't have it both ways. We can't know nothing and then also have this really well-funded program with probably tens of thousands of people working in it.
But that's probably what it is. So think of the UFO reality. Like just imagine some variation of like it's all true. So like, let's just say, for the sake of argument, aliens are here, living and dead. The tech is here. U.S. military recovered it. The Russians have recovered some too, but let's look at the U.S. side of it. So they've got alien tech. It's like, oh my God, that's like the holy grail. We must not let the rest of the world know about this. That would just throw everything out the window. This is the technology. This is power. This is Cold War power. This is money power. When I retire from as a 4-star general, I'm going to go work for that aerospace company and make $1 million. They're all thinking like this. So let's just say this is real. So that means there's a significant secret infrastructure that exists. And let's just say part of it's at Area 51, because it probably is. And so you've got a lot of people. So they're in there and they're surrounded by this kind of thick, steel or rubber wall that you can't break through. But sometimes someone does. I think that's really what we've been dealing with all these years. So you've got a very tightly controlled, significant infrastructure over which secrecy usually works, threats usually work, bribes usually work, all of that. But once in a while, they don't work and things slip out. When they do, the system has to go into high gear to disable those leaks. You discredit the individual, as they tried to do for years about Bob Lazar, and so on. Or you ignore it, you bury it, you mix it in with some things that are true, some things that are fake. That might be the MJ-12 story, quite possible. So that's what they do, and they're good at it. They're better at it than we are. The military psychological operations people are very slick. They are very intelligent. They know exactly what they're doing. So that's, I think, what we're dealing with. So a guy like Lazar comes out. I believe Bob Lazar's story. I took a lot of heat for it for a while, but I don't care. I think he's telling the truth. And there's others, there's other people out there. We've got them now. I certainly believe David Grush. I certainly believe a lot of these other whistleblowers that are out there too.
Do you think, that last question before we move on to the book, but do you think that we're going to see more information coming forward that's going to clarify things any more than we already have, or more of the same? What do you think is coming in the next?
Yeah, I think we're in kind of a permanent forward motion with all of this. The only problem is that, the guys on the other side of the fence, they haven't just walked, they're not walking away. They are still playing very effective defense. And that's really the problem. This is, you liken it to the irresistible force versus the immovable object. And disclosure is the irresistible force, but there's an immovable object. And we have to find out, how is this going to play out? I mean, think of this. This is a maybe advice for us not to get too excited. For all the information that has come out in the last decade, it's quite significant, really, when you stop and you lay all of the different facts that have come out. The existence of ATIP, the existence of OSAP, these Pentagon UFO study programs, the failed, aborted Kona Blue program. That was interesting. The Navy encounters that have come out and have been confirmed, and not just the Tic Tac, but the USS Omaha and all of these other cases, Ryan Graves and all of that stuff going on in 2014, 2015, the USS Roosevelt, and so much more. So much more has been confirmed. If it were 10 years ago and someone were to tell me, yes, Richard, all of these things are going to be coming out, I would have thought, well, that's just going to be a disclosure. And yet it hasn't been. And what that should tell us is that the United States national security state is quite resilient still. They are able to handle much more than we might have thought, perhaps, or at least I'll say much more than I had thought, is able to handle all kinds of things being thrown out at them, leaked, whatever. They deal with it, partly because we have our own version of a Soviet system. I mean, it's called mainstream media. And it is real. It does exist. It is controlled. And whether you're on the left or the right, it really doesn't matter. That's a very highly controlled media metropolis there. And yes, we can say, well, who gives a crap about mainstream media? Well, enough people do, because they still have a lot of influence.
Yeah.
And so they're able to manage narratives very well. So, all of the stuff that's come out that one might logically think would cause disclosure have not caused disclosure. And then you have to ask, well, what will it take? What will it take?
Welcome back to The Night Shift, your safe space for talking about UFOs, UAPs, NHI, disclosure, and everything else your friends, family, and coworkers are so sick and tired of hearing you go on and on and on about. Listen, the next time you're met with a 1,000-yard stare, a blank expression, don't get mad, just take a beat, stand up, turn around, and walk away. Because you don't need those people. You just need to believe in yourself and in them. Because they're real, and apparently they're here. But what do they want? And how is it going to affect you and me? These are the questions we explore here at Night Shift. We're not so much a podcast, we're more of a support group for wayward UFO enthusiasts. somewhere between In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy and that show where Jonathan Frakes rides in on a bicycle and asks a bunch of weird questions.
Ever gone mountain biking? What do you want to be when you grow up? What's the right tip?
I don't know. We're still working out the beats on this thing. But listen, if you've fallen down the UFO rabbit hole and you're just as lost and confused and disoriented as the rest of us, what you need is a guide. And we are that guide. So take me by the hand and hit that subscribe button. And while you're at it, don't forget to like and share this video. It's a heavy lift to build this channel from scratch, and I could use all the help I could get. Thanks in advance for being a part of Team Night Shift and the most exciting conversation happening anywhere on planet Earth.